Radio 97, we are talking all things law. Our resident lawyer, Despina Priala of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, with us every Thursday. She brings all of her legal expertise and provides some general advice on the latest of hot topics. She's got experience that spans more than 25 years, count them, in the area of property and commercial law. She also prepares wills as part of estate planning and litigation. She's with us once again. Hi, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Despina. Good morning, Wayno. Another week of talking law, and today is a doozy. We're covering a couple of big ones. This first topic is in regards to the voice to Parliament. I know so many ears will prick up now because across the network we hear so many people phone up, especially John Laws, asking, "What is this voice?
Yep,
how does it work?" And I dare say, in my opinion, I think so many people are genuinely confused as to how this voice will work and what the ultimate outcome would be. So this morning we just wanted to have a chat to you and get your professional outlook on what this voice actually means for everyone involved, because there's voting coming up and big changes could be on the way. So, yeah, in your professional opinion, Despina, what is the voice to Parliament?
Okay, so we might just go back a bit and maybe not say professional opinion. What I want to do...
I shouldn't say opinion, yeah. Rewind.
Well, I've been asked to comment on the voice movement because there's not a lot of information yet by the Albanese government. And I think everyone can agree with that. So I've been asked to perhaps comment this morning on it. So I want to be really clear from the outset. I do not have a political agenda at all. And I will only be providing some information that perhaps Australians out there are not privy to, or maybe haven't come across yet, that I come across from various publications that are quite credible. And I think it's important to give ordinary Australians out there as much information as possible, because if there is a referendum in the future, I think that they need to be given that information, because knowledge is power. And then with any referendums coming up, they'll be able to hopefully make the decision that's right for them. So I'm not here this morning to say this is right or this is wrong. All I want to do is provide information to ordinary Australians so they can perhaps make a decision down the track. That's all we're doing this morning.
Bit of an educational piece.
That's it. So we can go back a bit. So yes, the voice movement, or as it has been known, and there's various stories that have hit the headlines, Black sovereignty movement, okay, in Australia. And yes, there could be a possible referendum in the future for Australians. What does this mean? Ordinary Australians don't really know what's going on at the moment, and we haven't been told. And I can say that quite clearly. And we want to know what's going on. And usually we're the last to know. So what is it all about? So it really goes back, I think, to the history and the establishment of our Constitution, because that's really at the core of this. And I'll say this quite honestly. So I thought we'd just give a little bit of background about the Australian Constitution, because Australia is a constitutional monarchy. And I think it's important to understand a little bit about the Constitution, because what will become evident soon is the voice movement and this Black sovereignty movement. They're definitely trying to, I think they're trying to look at one of the powers in the Constitution here in relation to this movement. So basically, if we go back, the Constitution, rules and principles that apply to our system of government, all right? And the Constitution determines what powers the federal and the state government have. So Section 51 is the critical section in the Constitution. It has various heads of powers. For example, regulates trade, imposes taxes, etc. So Section 51 has a lot of heads of powers. For example, aliens powers, defence powers, taxation powers. Interestingly, and this is where we're getting to, it has what is called a race power. All right. So it's Section 51, subsection 26. There's a variety of them, and it's called race power. Okay. And basically, look, the race power gives the Parliament the power to make laws in relation to people of any race for whom it is deemed necessary to make special laws. Now, it's really interesting because if you look around the world, other constitutions, most of them have a provision to ban racial discrimination, whereas we actually have a race power. So some constitutionalists out there and some constitutional lawyers might say, well, aren't we really enabling racial discrimination by having a race power? But in any event, it's always been there. Okay. And interestingly, the race power was actually used with the constitutional referendum back in 1967. And we had, over the last few decades, we have some changes to the laws. We've had natal title, we've had the Hindmarsh Island Bridge cases has come out, and other interesting developments over the last few decades using this race power.
All right, so it has been used a number of times before, and this is what they're hanging this whole voice movement on.
Well, I think that's something that is for the large part correct. And I think that this voice movement, the Black sovereignty movement, is definitely wanting to look to use this race power again. And I think the ordinary Australians really need to ask themselves, well, will this voice movement or campaign, is it going to then secure this Black sovereignty and enshrine it in our current constitution? So are they looking to amend the constitution where we basically are moving towards what I would call co-sovereignty? Okay, so is that what the voice movement is? My question to the ordinary Australians, and particularly the Albanese government, is what is the voice movement? I'm questioning it as well. Is this perhaps the commencement of a long road to co-sovereignty down the track? Is that what it's going to look like? And what are we talking about when we say co-sovereignty anyway? So co-sovereignty, we're talking about maintaining own legal systems, living by your own customs, establishing your own education systems. So I guess my question again to the government is this voice movement, as I said, a long road to separatism, to creating a co-sovereignty in Australia to exist in the future, where we have one constitution for, I will say, ordinary Australians, and one constitution on laws for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So it is a question that I think really needs to be answered. Is this the road to separatism in Australia?
Yeah, and of course that brings up another point. You talk about co-sovereignty. So in other words, the question therefore I think is, if it ever got that far, would the Australian Parliament, as elected, democratically elected, and whatever flows from this voice movement, and so a separate Parliament, if you like, do they have equal powers, or can one have veto over the other? So if a constitutionally democratically elected Parliament passes a law, can the other part then overrule them?
And that's the point, isn't it? So if you have this joint sovereignty over Australia, it would be, wouldn't it, over all policy areas? And I think then the question that would need to be asked is, well, does that mean that the co-sovereignty that would exist, the Indigenous and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, would then have a say over any policy area of any kind in any part of Australia, because their view is that all policy areas affect Indigenous people in some way. So by creating a co-sovereignty down the track, and I'm not saying that that's what this is, I'm posing the question that is this voice and movement and the Black sovereignty movement actually doing that? Is that the intention behind it? And I'm just posing that question for people to think about. If that is the case, and there is this co-sovereignty on the table, but not openly disclosed at this stage anyway to ordinary Australians, is that what it's going to do? Is it then going to provide that and enable that power in this co-sovereignty world that we would exist in, where that means they would have a say in all policy areas, in all laws that affect every ordinary Australian in any capacity whatsoever?
Because you're mentioning this because you do think it could possibly be a possibility?
I think, yes, that it is a possibility.
That's
now,
huge.
It's huge, and I could be wrong. Yeah. And sure, and time will tell, won't it, with the referendum, if it is issued, what's the referendum about? But even when there's more information disclosed, I don't know if the government will actually provide specific information or the information that I'm talking about. I think that the underlying currents, if you read certain publications from certain reputable journalists and publications, as I've said before, they do talk about this, the voice movement potentially, although some of them are saying it's a positive movement, but I'm just saying, look, potentially it is the road to co-sovereignty down the track. And if it is, and I'm saying if it is the commencement of a long road to co-sovereignty in Australia, do we want that for Australia? And how would that work in any event in the future? And I think people just need to start asking those questions. Is it a voice to executive government and not just a voice in Parliament? There is a difference. So I think that question needs to be asked, and I think ordinary Australians deserve the answers to these questions. And this show is, as I said, all about trying to inform Australians of topics like this that do come up, that are important to us, that are pertinent to living in Australia by current laws and under our current constitution, which of course we still have the UK that serves as our head of state. And that hasn't changed. And all the executive powers are still exercised by, well, now the King, which are enforced by the Governor-General. So we still have a long history and a monarchy history and background to Australia that still exists. So is the co-sovereignty going to change all of that?
Yeah.
There are a lot of very deep, pretty basic questions there involving, well, our day-to-day lives. So you would think, or you would hope that before we're asked to put our yes or no on a little piece of paper, which they're telling us will be by the end of the year, surely we're going to get some more information so we can at least make some sort of informed decision, you would think.
You would think so, but I've seen over the years, of course, the government sometimes does not do that, whether it's intentional or otherwise. So that's why we want to bring some other information to light, perhaps for Australians to then look into it for themselves. And really, is this voice movement all about power and sovereignty? And if it is, then we have a right to know that as ordinary Australians.
And what could happen down the track. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Despina. Coming up next, another juicy topic, the law of trespassing. If you own a property, you have to listen to this. It's quite unbelievable and happened not far from here in Kyogle. Stay tuned. That's coming up on Talking Law on Radio 97.
Are you confused about legal jargon? Do you need legal advice but don't know where to turn? Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97. Despina, a leading lawyer with over 20 years of experience, will demystify the law and provide practical advice to help you navigate legal issues. Whether it's a family matter, a property dispute, or a business concern, Talking Law has got you covered. Don't miss out on this valuable resource. Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97.